and share our tools for getting people excited about bats. I have my intern Cora with me today. She'll introduce herself shortly here. The idea is, so we don't have any pollinating bats in Montana. And so I was lacking that part of my presentation basically. And so when I hired Cora, I tasked her with putting together some more slides to add to our presentation based on pollinators. And so she's got some really cool stuff to share. And so the way we're going to work it is we'll just run off of the same PowerPoint. And when we get to pollinators, you'll hear a shift and it will be going from me to Cora. So that will happen. And I am the non-game specialist, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks for our region in Billings. And I'm also just an area biologist as well here. So Cora.
Hi, I'm Cora Sylvan. I'm the intern this summer. I'm working with Megan. And I'm just going to be talking about pollinating bats towards the end of Megan's spiel. So, yeah.
Okay, Megan, you want to go ahead and get started?
Sure. Getting there. I don't think they can. I'm getting there, I swear. Okay, here we go. See it? Are we sharing? Can you see my screen?
No, not yet.
Oh, I have to pick which one. Sorry.
There you go.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to share this PowerPoint. I know a lot of the folks on this call know a lot of the things that are going to be in this PowerPoint. I just think doesn't have to be a PowerPoint format all the time, for sure, when we're doing wildlife viewing, but clearly part of the goal is to educate folks about bats. And so with COVID, we've shifted a lot of this stuff to just engaging conversation, true and false questions, kind of outdoors type stuff. But before that, we would typically, in the right venue, kind of start with this PowerPoint. So just kind of basic bat stuff. I have multiple PowerPoints that we gear to children sometimes that are kind of a little more basic. This is more kind of an adult PowerPoint, but I tried not to include too much because it's very state specific. And so the idea, my goal was to kind of set up we have an educational trunk that we use for our bat walks. And the idea was to try to set up a traveling trunk because we only had one here in Billings and it was hard to get to all the small communities. And so my goal when I presented this 2 years ago was to put together a traveling trunk and get some citizen scientists out in the communities to use those trunks because we can't be everywhere at once. And so we're just about there with putting the trunk together. And I've recruited some folks that are qualified and interested in leading walks. So we're almost there. We haven't had any walks led by citizen scientists yet. So here is the PowerPoint that I've got. So bats evolved from shrew-like ancestors about 50 million years ago. You can see that neat fossil photo. We have a little cool replica of that fossil that we'll show you later on when we show you our props here. And it's kind of neat. You can put a piece of paper over it and kind of pencil over it to get a little print of it for folks who are visiting your table or at your station. So a lot of times I'll pose this question to the crowd first. How many species of bats do you think we have worldwide? Frequently, you don't get a number anywhere near this high. You know, it's more in the hundreds usually, if that. So nearly 1,300 species, over 20% of all mammals are bats. There are two orders, megabats and microbats. Microbats are insectivores and they're basically small. Big bats are the megabats and they're mostly fruit eating or flying foxes. So 70% of bats are insectivores and the rest are made up of fruit eaters, fish eaters, and vampire bats, blood eaters. So as you all know, bats are capable of echolocation. I frequently like to ask folks, true or false, are bats blind? A lot of people think bats are blind. Bats can see as well as we can see. We have a pretty fun prop for demonstrating echolocation, and it's a Slinky, and we'll demonstrate how that works later. Very cheap, easy, fun prop. Bats have delayed fertilization and implantation. Small litter size and long lifespan, that frequently really surprises folks. They think that they're very similar to mice, and they're not. They live a very long time, and they typically only produce one pup a year. So that's another reason it's so important to conserve them, because they don't reproduce very quickly. And they're also capable of regulating their temperature and going into torpor when needed. So the bottom photo here, I like to, before I bring that up, ask people if they think that a bat's wing is more similar to a human hand bone structure or a bird. Frequently, people think it's a bird because they fly, but we then cover how, as you can see, they have all the same digits as a human hand, and they're the only mammal that's actually capable of flying. There are other mammals that glide, flying squirrels, but they don't truly fly. So there are big bats and little bats. The smallest bat is a bumblebee bat. It weighs less than a penny, and its wingspan is only 6 to 7 inches, and that's a cute little bugger. And then the golden crowned flying fox is the largest bat. It weighs 3 pounds, and it has a wingspan of up to 6 feet. Also adorable. We have this poster that our heritage program put together for us. It's really neat, and we'll show you that. We've got it out with our stuff here. On the back, it shows all the species distributions for the state, and it shows, just gives a bunch of facts about each species. We have 15 species of bats in our state. Again, they're all insectivores. So a little bit about how we research bats. We do presence absence surveys. So that would just be if you see bats roosting or a maternity colony. If you find droppings consistently, then you know that there's bats there. We do acoustic monitoring. Right now, Cora and I are going to be going out in the next couple weeks to deploy acoustic monitors for basically it's for white nose base survey data. So we just don't have a ton of base bat composition data here. And so just trying to really get good coverage the last couple years in the state on acoustic surveys and species composition and, seasonal use, et cetera. We do roost count. So when we find a roost, we can go out and do our best to count as accurately as we can. Mist nets and harp traps. Mostly I've only used mist nets, but works the same as it does with birds. They get tangled in there and you untangle them. Marking and banding. We've not done any banding in Montana that I know of, or microchips, but people do use those for marking bats. We did a pilot here on radio telemetry. It's pretty difficult because you can't have a very long battery life on a teeny tiny transmitter, and bats are teeny tiny. And so it's, I think, somewhere around 10 days is the best we could do. And we didn't have very high success, and is VHF telemetry every day, basically trying to find them. And we found a couple again in some roost areas, but not very high success. They're pretty challenging to track. And then night video and thermal imaging. The thermal imaging has been pretty useful under bridges and stuff. You can just stick the thermal imaging camera underneath and see if there are bats under there. And then genetic analysis from tissue and dropping. So when we mist net, if possible, we'll take a very tiny wing punch. Doesn't affect the bat's function at all for genetic testing. And then we can also collect droppings under roost sites. So just a look at acoustic monitoring. The fellow on the left here is setting up one of those acoustic monitoring devices in the field that Cora and I will be setting up. And then on the right, you've got, that's typically what a bat call will show up as. We have our iPad here, and we're going to show you what it looks like when you pick up a bat call with the bat microphone on your iPad. So the objectives of the acoustic surveillance, again, are really baseline data. We really don't know when and what bats are using in the state. So we can look at what they're using nightly, what species are here in what months, how weather and landscape affects them, when they migrate and when they disappear and are in hibernation. just some pictures of that stuff. The bottom labeled E is actually, you're able to use a black light on a bat wing. And if it has the fungus that causes white nose, it'll fluoresce orange, which is what you see there. And then this just demonstrates, there's a couple that demonstrate banding and how we measure. So bats use a ton of different roosting sites, places you might not even think. Caves and mines, bridges, crevices, and I mean, the tiniest little crevice in a cliff when you're hiking up a talus slope, they might be using. Buildings, we live in Billings, which is the biggest city in Montana. And, you know, we've got great pictures of spotted bats in parking garages. Trees, just under little snags and bark that you would never think to look for a bat. I'm sure we all walk by tons of bats that we don't know are there. They'll hang in the foliage on trees. They'll use stumps, logs, snags, on the ground under leaf litter. I had a woman recently tell me she was raking her garden and a bat flew up and she was kind of surprised and wondered if it was sick. And I told her it's not that uncommon for them to actually use that as a site to hang out. And then artificial roost bat houses. Whenever we do an outreach event for bats, typically I like to have bat house building plans. And then I also have the recommendations from BatCon on how to site it for your area. I think it's great for folks to build bat houses, but if they actually want them to be occupied, I think it's important that they understand micrositing and how to paint the bat house, etc. We have a really good relationship in Montana with some local caving groups. And this is just a look at, so we've got the Northern Rocky Mountain Grotto, which is a caving group here, and Big Fork, which is a high school, has an amazing caving club. They've been magnificent about sharing their secret caves with us under the stipulation that we won't share their secret caves with anyone else. And so they've been great with providing technical assistance for folks like that crazy person in that photo that want to do those types of things. And they've also been great about collecting data for us and, you know, being really strict about decontamination protocols and everything like that. So that's been an amazing relationship for us to get more data than we ever could have without them. And this, just a quick look, you know, this would be probably state specific. This is just a quick look at the number of bat hibernacula in Montana. And then this is, I think that's, I don't know if that's cut off on your screen, it's cut off on mine, the annual visitation of each of these caves. And so just to look at how much use these caves get by humans and the threat that could be to bats with disease transmission. This is just a look at some of the mines and bridges they might use for roost. As I mentioned, trees, rocks, buildings. There is one in that tree. I can't even see him right now, but he's there. Here's just a couple different ways and different types of bat houses. You can mount them differently. But as I mentioned, you know, there's certain orientation you want to have, you know, certain maximum and minimum daily temperatures when you place them. And you can find a lot of that on Bat Conservation International. Erin might talk a little bit more about that. As I mentioned, cliffs, talus slopes, tree root wads, leaf litter, any place there's a little place they can crawl up and stay warm, they're very likely to use. There's a little bat hiding in there. You can see his fuzzy, you can't. So anyway, why should we care about bats? Well, I think we all know the reason for that, but some folks clearly don't. One little brown bat can eat approximately 1,200 mosquitoes an hour. And a lot of times if we're doing an outreach event, I'll put, I don't know, 1,200 Cheerios or something in a tub so that people can see what that looks like. A colony of 150 big browns can eat 33 million cucumber beetles in a summer. And the Mexican free-tailed bats in Bracken Cave can eat 200 tons of insects nightly. So just from a pest removal standpoint, state by state or nationally, it's a lot of money that bats can save in pesticide usage and crop loss. So I added this illustration because I actually painstakingly put 1,200 mosquitoes on here so folks could see just what that looks like. And one elephant is approximately 5 tons. And so those Mexican free-tailed bats on a nightly basis are eating approximately 40 elephants volume worth of insects. So bats as pollinators, as I mentioned, Cora's going to cover this a little bit later, so we'll just put that as a holding spot there. So major issues that bats have. Human intolerance is a big one, as we all know. I have a story I like to tell about. I had a landowner call me and he said, well, I've got bats in my house. And, I said, well, what's going on? And, well, I don't know. We had 6 or 7 in the house. And as the conversation progressed about 10 minutes in, he said, well, I guess I should tell you the whole story. And it turned out he had hired an exterminator, and the exterminator had been putting up a trap during breeding season to capture the adults and then drowning them. And so the pups were then left non-volant, hanging there with mom not coming back. And so I like to share that story because it's awful and it does touch people. And I always tell them to share that story with their neighbors if they have a bat problem, to try to make sure that they do it ethically and correctly. Collisions, hazards such as wind turbines. A lot of times bats will think a wind turbine is a tree. There's been some research that says that they may think that because it's completely smooth, it could be a water surface. Loss of prey species. So of course, if we're spraying pesticides and we're killing the insects that they eat, they're not going to have as much to forage on. Lack of basic biological knowledge. As I mentioned, in Montana, we are lacking a lot. I think a lot of states are probably lacking baseline knowledge just because they are hard to track. Disturbance, so clearing for building houses and subdivisions or any kind of roost habitat, knocking down trees, disturbance in caves from people caving. Drowning hazard, so typically, especially out here, there's stock tank issues. If people don't have ladders in their stock tanks, then bats can drown in stock tanks. And white nose syndrome, unfortunately, since the last time I presented this, we have had some positives in Montana for white nose syndrome. So I had a map on here. I didn't have time to update it, so I removed it because it was not current. But we do have it here in Montana now, unfortunately, not shockingly. This is just another quick look. A lot of times I'll pose this as a true or false question. True or false, bats are dirty and they have rabies. And no, they're not dirty. They clean themselves much like your house cat would. And it's a matter of, I like to talk about prevalence. So all the bats flying around aren't being tested. It's the ones who present sick or bite someone or out during the day that are being tested. And so that doesn't speak to the actual prevalence of rabies in the population. Skunks have a much higher prevalence of rabies than bats do. We know that white nose syndrome, we know that 7 species may be impacted by white nose in Montana. 6 to 7 million bats in North America have died since 2006. And I bet that might be slightly outdated at this point as well. There's a fungus that causes white nose. So you can detect the fungus and they may still not be symptomatic for white nose. Predicted regional extinction of one of the most common species, the little brown bat, is by 2026 if things continue the way they are with white nose. And the fungus exists in Europe, but for some reason, there hasn't been any mass mortality there. Wind energy, it is definitely a challenge for bats. Just to touch briefly, of North America's 45 species, 11 have been detected dead at wind energy facilities as a result of collision with turbines. 7 species we've had documented at wind energy facilities in North America from Montana. And the highest fatalities are during late summer and early fall. And we think that's because it's typically migration for several species. Living with bats. So people don't want bats in their house, and that's completely understandable. There's a safety risk, exposure to rabies, exposure to guano and urine, damage to structures. If they're up in your attic long enough and there's a ton of guano accumulation and there's urine staining on the wall, it can damage the structure. And if bats are living outside, I tell folks they should be thankful, although sometimes folks don't want, bat guano accumulating where their dog lays on the porch. So I tell folks to consider putting up a bat house. I'm pretty cautious about telling them when to do this. Frequently, I liken it to you have your house set up just like you like it. And if you put up a house next door that's empty and the same as yours, are you going to move into that one? No. So I frequently encourage bat houses if folks are doing exclusion work, or if they just want to see if they can get them to use it. But I do tell people that that's not a solution to having bats in a place that you don't want them. So if you have a bat in the house, you only want to capture it. I mean, if you can shoo it out, that's the best way to deal with it. Otherwise, this is a good illustration of how to use some sort of container and cardboard like you would with maybe a spider to just try and slide it in there and then set it free outside. If it's been in sleeping quarters, then you would want to capture it and have it tested for rabies. So bats are no more dangerous than any other animal when threatened or sick. They're, like I said, if they're sick, they're more likely to defend themselves and bite people. A healthy bat is not going to attack you. Clearly, you never want to pick up a dead or a sick bat. You might want to call your local wildlife agency, such as us. And if you may have been bitten by a bat, you want to seek medical attention. And that would be if it's in your sleeping quarters, because their bites are so small that if it bit you in your sleep, you may not know. This is just a look at how to exclude bats. The only way to actually get rid of bats permanently is to exclude every single entryway that they have to that place that they want to be. So that little thing on the right is called a bat cone. And essentially you wait until pupping season is over and all the pups can fly. And then you seal up every single entryway and exit except for that one. And then when they come out, they can't get back up that tube. So I think that's all I have. I think I'm gonna give the screen to Cora now, or she's gonna switch over on my PowerPoint. You're just gonna get on here. And yeah, so here's Cora, and then we will see you back with the stuff we have to show you.
Megan, we do have a question.
Okay.
I have a question. If you have an interpretive sign, I guess, of general bat conservation and biology that you use to educate the public, and would you be willing to share it?
I don't have one currently, but I'd be happy to. That'd be really neat to have. It might be even something neat to have in our office here where people come in to buy licenses. So I'd be happy to collaborate with someone if someone wants to do that.
Okay. That was Jerry from Deltona, the city of Deltona.
And I have my email and phone number contact at the very end of the presentation as well. So,
okay.
All right, I'm going to switch to Cora here. How do I mute myself? Here, you can come up here. Okay.
Hi everyone, I'm Cora Selden, I'm the intern. And so I think I'm just gonna keep on chugging with bats as pollinators. So the action of pollination by plants, by bats is this huge word. I know it looks scary, but it's way easier. It's chiropterophily, but emphasis on it's easier. It's a big scary word. It just means that plants are being pollinated by bats. So chiropterophily. So how does this actually work? Y'all probably know, but you know, when we do this for like outreach programs and stuff, not a lot of people know like how a bat actually pollinates. So I mean, obviously they'll fly down to a flower and drink the nectar, and the nectar will usually kind of be in the deepest part of the flower so that all of the pollen surrounding that nectar will rub off, and it'll stick to the bat's fur. So this little guy is a lesser long-nosed bat. He's not yellow, he's actually brown. And all of that yellow stuff is pollen. So they're very efficient pollinators. They get all that nectar and all that pollen sticks to them. And then when they hop to their next meal, the pollen of the previous flower mixes with this new one, and ta-da, you have pollination. So it's a really important thing that these bats are pollinating flowers that are really far apart. And yeah, it helps them pollinate in maybe ways they wouldn't have been able to before. So you can't see this, but it says, did you know bats can pollinate up to 30 flowers in a single night? So with the rate that they are pollinating these flowers is probably greater than a bee or a butterfly could do in a single night. So they're really efficient. They're getting this nectar, spreading it to all these flowers and helping them repopulate. It's really important for like reforestation and habitat restoration. They're super important. I don't know if this link will work, but it's a really good visual of how a bat can actually get the nectar from the plant. So the bats have these tongues that have bristles at the end, kind of like a cat tongue has barbs, but it's just at the very tip. And it uses those barbs to like hold the nectar and suck it back into their mouth. And so here's kind of a cool visual. But these bats have tongues that are up to 3 inches long. And you think, oh, that's a pretty long tongue. Well, when you consider that the bat is only 3 inches long, it's the same size as its body. So they have these huge long tongues with barbs on them and float above the flower to get that nectar.
You can skip some video.
Yeah, okay. And
It's not showing up because you're not sharing it.
Oh,
Sorry,
really?
so I'm just.
okay, sorry.
okay.
You guys can't see that. Anyway, so also as they fly, bats will spread the seeds from the plants that they've been visiting or maybe fruit that they've eaten, and they can spread it further. Bats can fly up to 50 miles in a night. So these habitats that are either isolated from each other or really bare and desolate due to, either deforestation or human intervention, whatever it may be, these bats are spreading seeds maybe farther than wind or water could take them in a night. And when they're pollinating at the same time, that really helps the environment to spring back. So these bats are doing a really good job at helping reforest and repopulate plant populations. So usually we say which plants are pollinated by bats. You got bananas, the cocoa plant, and mangoes. And if you guessed all of them, you're right. They pollinate over 500 species of plants. That includes anything from, like we said, bananas, chocolate, to timber. In Australia, they pollinate timber trees. And, here in the United States, they are really known for pollinating agave and yucca down south. And when people learn that the lesser long-nosed bat is the only bat that pollinates agave, which is the only reason we have tequila, it was the first bat that was knocked off the endangered species list. So it's really important that people get educated about bats, however it helps. And they also can eat the insects on the plants they pollinate. So not only are they pollinating maybe farmer crops, but they're also, like Megan said, really good pest control. So helping them a lot. Oh goodness. Well, you can't see it, but it says true or false, bats only like really good flowers. Okay.
Yeah, we can do it.
True or false, bats like really good smelling flowers. And it's false. They love those musty flowers and they don't really like colorful ones because they can't see it as well at night. So why is this? Why do they like stinky white flowers? Well, first, they're easier to see at night. So if you think about moonlight reflecting, it's going to reflect better off a white flower, a big white flower that'll be easier to see at night than maybe a small little red flower that's kind of hidden and not as vibrant maybe. And they're very fragrant. You can probably smell a grosser smelling flower from farther away than you could a rose maybe. So that also helps attract bats. And they have lots of nectar. So another reason these bats will visit them. There are 48 species of pollinating bats, and weird font. They live on any continent with tropical ecosystems. So they live anywhere in North America, South America, India, Australia, everywhere with tropics. That's where they'll live. Are pollinating bats at risk? And obviously they are, yes. And they need food and habitat to be happy. So how we can help? Food, you have the option to plant these white reflective flowers that maybe don't smell as good, but these bats love it. We have fleabane at the bottom, evening primrose, moonflowers. They'll really attract bats, and that'll help attract them. Habitat, we really have to protect these dry desert ecosystems as they get more at risk for people moving out there. That's diminishing the bats' natural habitat, which is not great for them. So, and also bat houses, that helps. So we need to help these pollinating bats, and we can help do that. So that's it. Oh, there you go.
All right, so we are clearly past 12:30, and so rather than show you all of our stuff, why don't we let Erin go ahead and have her time, and if we have time at the end, we will show you our props. Otherwise, I'm happy to send out photos of those, or talk to people on the phone, or send a list of what's in our trunk. I have a really good bat trunk list as well. So yeah, if we have time at the end, we'll do that, and if not, I'm happy to figure out a way to share those separately.
Thanks, Megan. Erin, you're up.
Okay, thank you, Megan and Cora. That was awesome. Let me share my screen. Okay, does everybody see that? Thumbs up. Thank you, Megan. Okay, so my name is Erin Cord. I am the Batwalks Network Coordinator for Bat Conservation International. I've been with BCI about 2 years now, and I'm going to talk to you guys today really quick about who we are at BCI and what we do, and then about our Batwalks program, and then how we've been dealing with everything since COVID, because I feel like that's something we could probably all contribute to. But I'm just going to talk about how we've been doing here at BCI. All right. So at Bat Conservation International, our mission is very simple. We just want to end bat extinctions worldwide, and we're very focused on every aspect of bat conservation. Just a quick history, we were founded in 1982. One of our founders was Dr. Merlin Tuttle, and if you've heard of him, you're probably into bats, which is super cool. He's a big deal in the bat world. But at the time, public perception of bats was pretty low. People really did not like them. Generally, I think most people thought they were scary, thought they were weird, thought they were creepy, all sorts of negative adjectives associated with bats at the time. And BCI really wanted to focus on changing public perception and having people understand why these bats are so important and how they fit into the ecosystem and why they matter so much. So they actually started BCI in Austin, which at the time seemed like a crazy decision, because if you know anything about our city, we have this giant bat colony of Mexican free-tailed bats that lives in a bridge on Congress Avenue, which is right downtown, right over Lady Bird Lake. And at the time in the 80s, the city had just built that bridge, and they were horrified to realize they had built a lovely Mexican free-tailed bat habitat, and people were freaking out. And there was all these articles, if you look back at the old publications from the day, of people complaining about bats attacking them and bats, taking over the city and all this kind of ridiculous hyperbole. So they started in Austin and really worked on this campaign to change people's hearts and minds about bats. And one of the things that Dr. Tuttle did, and one of the things he's so amazing at still, is he's a great bat photographer. And if you look at a lot of pictures of bats, often people are holding them. The bats are echolocating because they're freaking out, and their little mouths are open. You can see their fangs, and it doesn't help with kind of that idea that bats are not scary. So Dr. Tuttle took these photographs of bats like this, where the bats are kind of chill, and you can see how cute they are, which I know we're not supposed to say as scientists, but bats are very cute. They have really interesting characteristics. They have all these personalities. I think this really helped people kind of think about them in a different way. And in the beginning, we did a ton of K through 12 education, a lot of local stuff in Texas, really working mostly with kids. And as we've gotten to be a bigger organization and we've shifted more towards global conservation of bats, we really needed to develop an outreach program that fit kind of the scope of our organization. And that's where Batwalks comes in. So a couple of years ago, we did a survey to all the members of BCI. So that's the public can buy a membership for BCI and support bat conservation. And we asked all of them why they joined BCI. Like, what was it about bats that kind of made them want to support them? Like, why were they so excited about bats? And almost all of them had a personal story where they had, found a bat in their aunt's barn or seen a bat flight, at Bracken Cave, which is this amazing place right here north of San Antonio. And everyone had these bad experiences that seemed to really stick with them and kind of drive them to support bat conservation. And we really think that, these experiences are really the way to get people and the public to kind of buy into our mission of bat conservation. So we wanted to bring bat experiences to everyone. And that's kind of what this program is all about. And we wanted to make sure we could scale this in a large way. So the idea of bat walks is not new. As Megan was saying, they have bat walks in Montana. They have bat walks all over the place. There's a huge bat walk movement in the UK. The Brits love bats, which I was thrilled to find out. It's very, very cool. Bat Conservation Trust is a British bat organization. They're really amazing. There's a bat walks group in New York City where they do bats in Central Park, which is really neat. And then there's a lot of local groups in Texas and then many other places in the country that do bat walks. But we really wanted to join them under one umbrella of BCI and kind of make it so wherever you live in the United States and then hopefully eventually the world, you can go on a bat walk. And that's kind of where we started. Because bat walks are bat experiences, and that's what people kind of need maybe to think about bats in a different way and to understand them and to appreciate them. So our plan was to train this network of bat ambassadors, which is what we call our volunteers that go through our training, to provide these interactive bat experiences across the cities, starting in the United States. And our plan was to take over the world with bat walks at some point, but right now, just in the United States. And we couldn't do this without partnerships. The whole program, and honestly, BCI as an organization, we're very much about partnerships. That's really what we do best. We're extremely collaborative wherever we go, and we really like to work with other groups and to have really strong programs. And with bat walks, we got our initial funding from the Houston Zoo and the Brown Foundation, and that really enabled us to have our pilot year. And then so we decided to work with zoos and nature centers, master naturalists, and invite all these organizations for each city we went to, and invite these organizations to bring staff. And then we train the staff of these organizations to lead a bat walk. And so these are all of our hosts for the cities we've done, except I left out one, which I feel terrible about. I need to update this presentation. But yeah, so for example, in Dallas, the Dallas Zoo hosted us and we invited the Dallas Zoo had staff, the Arboretum had staff. We had a bunch of parks around the city, state parks, local parks, Dallas Parks and Recreation. So anyone kind of doing nature interpretation could come to this training, learn about bat walks and how to do a bat walk, and then incorporate that into their programming. And this helps us with quality control of these bat walks because, we come in, do the training, and then we leave, and everyone and all these groups do the bat walks kind of in their areas, in their communities, and we're not doing them. So we want to make sure the people doing the bat walks are amazing at nature interpretation, which all these people are, and it's really just an easy fit. And we don't tell groups what a bat walk needs to look like. They can really kind of do it in whatever way makes sense for the organization. And the way that we've been able to do this, the coolest part of all, is there's this newish, I say new, it's newish technology of this Echometer Touch 2 bat detector from Wildlife Acoustics. It actually is a more reasonable cost. A lot of bat acoustic detectors are quite expensive and have been in the past, but this is actually something that it's about $189 per device. And that was kind of a reasonable price point for us to provide one of these to each organization that comes on a bat walks training with us. So the Echometer Touch 2 actually allows people to hear the bats that are flying over them even if they can't see them. And as Megan was talking about kind of the spectrogram and looking at the bat call, it kind of shows you the bat calls in real time, which people are just kind of blown away by because they're seeing sound, they're hearing the bats, even though the frequency of the bats calling is higher than they can hear with their ear. This device allows them to do that. And then it also auto IDs, and it will tell you with a varying degree of certainty, but really good enough for outreach, very, very good, what bat you're hearing. And so people it blows their minds. So you could do a bat walk in your neighborhood park. You don't have to go to Bracken Cave or the Congress Avenue Bridge in Austin. You can pretty much go anywhere in the United States and there's going to be bats there. And people can actually hear bats in their own communities, in their own neighborhoods, and give them those bat experiences. So this is our pilot year. As I said, we did 6 trainings, mostly in Texas and then one in Miami, Florida. And this was kind of based on where our funding was coming from. So that's why we focused on these areas. But these are all the places we went, which is pretty exciting. And what's in a training? It's basically a 1-day course where we kind of go over everything you need to know about bats. So, you know, the talk that Megan and Cora just gave a lot of that material is definitely covered, as well as kind of how to give a successful bat walk, how to plan your bat walk, best practices. We help them kind of troubleshoot some of the things they might run into. And then we do a lot of practice with the bat detector. We actually have these very fancy speakers that play the bat calls at the appropriate frequency, and it allows for people to actually practice using the Echometer Touch in the classroom before we actually go outside and look for bats. The training is typically ended around dusk, which is perfect for a time to go out and look for bats. But the speakers kind of give us a very kind of classroom opportunity to practice with the bat detector, and knowing that, you know, those calls are going to keep coming and you can kind of get everything set up has been really, really helpful. And since this was our pilot year, we got a lot of feedback because, you know, the first class, let's just say the first training looks very different than the last training we did in person. We did a lot of surveys to our participants. We surveyed them after they'd been bat ambassadors for a little while, just to see kind of what we could do better, what they wish they had learned, what was their favorite part of the training, what was their least favorite part. All that good feedback was really, really helpful. Most of the results were kind of the same. People wanted more local focus, which makes a ton of sense. And, you know, we came into it initially with this like BCI, Bat Conservation International idea. And, you know, we spent a lot of time talking about, you know, conservation of bats globally. And like, that's not relevant to someone doing a bat walk in San Antonio, Texas. Like, we want to talk about local issues with bats and the local bats that they're going to encounter. That seems very much like common sense, but it took us a minute to get there, but we are there, which is great. Also, as I said, it's a day-long training, so a lot of lecture, a lot of sitting there. So we were kind of working on making it more interactive, making it more fun. And then people just wanted more practice with the bat detector, because I think that's the trickiest part about leading a bat walk, is using this technology. It's pretty user-friendly, but there's definitely a learning curve. And so we wanted to make sure they had more time with that, and then just more time to kind of plan their walks and kind of talk to us about what makes a good bat walk. So that was all of our feedback. And then we wanted to create a virtual community, since we were going into cities and then, you know, doing the training for a day and then leaving. We couldn't really do an in-person community. So we created this virtual community on Facebook Workplace, which is it's a Bat Walks group where all the people that have graduated from the training join if they'd like to. You don't have to. I know not everyone loves more social media in their lives, but this is just a very private group of bat ambassadors where everyone kind of share content, you know, talk about things that they've encountered, troubleshoot, that sort of thing. And then we do webinars for them, and I post a ton of content, and latest bat research, latest bat news, any interesting kind of courses or webinars that are available through partners. And it just really gives a place for bat ambassadors to connect, because we really want them to feel like they're part of something larger, a larger bat ambassador community, this network of trained ambassadors, you know, across the country. And then we were working very hard on tracking our program too. Any that run a program, you know that sometimes tracking is such a bear, but it's so important to have those metrics. And so each group that did the training, each organization that would come to a training, they agreed to do 2 bat walks the year following the training. And we have report forms that they fill out, tell us about their bat walks, and that way we can kind of keep track of what they do. And we actually developed a SurveyMonkey option, and then also a mobile calls option where they can like text bat walk report to a number, and the report form pops up on their phone. And we just wanted to make it as easy as possible to report those metrics back to us so we could track what our bat ambassadors were doing, and just, you know that the program is working efficiently. So these are our preliminary metrics. We had 6 trainings our pilot year, 145 ambassadors trained, 60 partner organizations. When this metrics snapshot was taken, we had about 60 bat walks happening and counting. And there was like more all the time. And then I think you guys know what happens next, COVID-19. Unfortunately, like everyone, we had to kind of shut down the program temporarily. And we didn't really know what was going to come next and what to expect. So Obviously, we stopped doing in-person trainings. We canceled a ton of stuff that we had scheduled for 2020. And as an organization, I should say, we're very lucky. We were able to weather the COVID storm, and we did not let go of any staff, which was really nice. I was a little worried just because my job is in-person outreach, and how does that work if I can't be in person? But BCI is really invested in this program, and they're really invested in kind of the public communication part of it, and getting people, getting buy-in to our mission, and reaching more people. And I put this little cartoon bat here because we get a ton of COVID questions, and I'm sure Megan and Corey, you guys do too. And I just want to say, we were a little worried about backlash against bats after kind of the initial information about COVID came out. And I will say, we still don't know if the virus came from a bat. They know it came from an animal. They don't know what animal. And so, we like to kind of focus on the fact that habitat loss and habitat encroachment creates these situations where there's more wildlife human interactions. And those are going to be the situations where these animal viruses can jump to people. So conservation is more important than ever. And what we found is most people really agreed with that message, and our supporters really doubled down on their love of bats and kind of being bat advocates out in the world. And we've really experienced, I would say, the majority of our interactions with people have been really supportive and wonderful. So that was really, really nice for us as an organization to see. And we feel really fortunate that, people are, fighting for bats, even if we're not telling them to. They're kind of doing it on their own, which is really fantastic. So kind of during the height of COVID, some of our bat ambassadors were still actually doing bat walks. As I mentioned, we were in Texas and Florida. So 2 states that didn't exactly have the most stringent COVID protocols. And that's no shade against any state, just stating fact. In Texas, things were still open. And it was kind of up to the organization in some instances. It really depended on where you worked and what people were comfortable with. So some people were doing bat walks. And we created a list of best practices that we kind of made, how to do a COVID safe bat walk, and things like social distancing, limiting group size, wearing masks, tons of hand sanitizer, kind of all these different things that our bat ambassadors, we talked to them, we said what's working, what's not, and they gave us some really great feedback, and we created this best practices list to set out. And we talked to our partners and kind of seeing where everyone was at and what they were doing, and it was really all across the board. And I will say, a lot of our partners, a lot of the zoos and nature centers had to let staff go. So we lost a lot of bat ambassadors, and it was just a very tough time, as I'm sure all of you, experienced during this time for nature educators and for these organizations that are nonprofit. And depend, a lot of the zoos and nature centers depend on visitation to get most of their revenue. And so that was really difficult. And we just wanted to be as supportive as we could and offer as much support as possible. So we did do an online training last year. It was for organizations that had already taken our Bat Walks training. And so we just wanted to give them a kind of refresher of the material if they were interested. And also if they had new staff that had come on since the last training, they could train up the new staff. And we didn't want to invite new organizations because we did not feel that we could confidently teach people to use the bat detector online. It's just not something, it's something you really need to be in person for. So we did this online training last year. We learned a lot about how to do online training, what works and what doesn't. Again, always with the feedback. And it went pretty well. We had about 30 new bat ambassadors from this, and this kind of leads us to where we're now, but I'll get to that in a second. I feel like I'm running out of time. So we just wanted to do more engagement with our bat ambassadors. We did a lot of virtual events last year, a lot of webinars, I did a lot of virtual bat talks. I asked our partners if they needed any bat virtual talks, since most of them were doing virtual stuff. And so just trying to keep them engaged with content and with Facebook Workplace and all of that. And then, we did a webinar on bats and COVID, which would enable them to answer some of these tough questions that we get about bats and COVID, which was great. And then one thing I'm super excited about was we had a little time, obviously, to kind of sit back and breathe and think about ways we could make this program better and stronger. And one of the things that came out of that was gardening for bats. And it's a lot of what Megan and Cora just talked about, which is super cool. And I think this is kind of happening lots of places, but just developing a plant list, since most of our bats are insectivorous, it's developing native plants that host the native insects, which are the bat food. And, there's a bit of a twist, like planting things that bloom later in the day when the bats are coming out to attract those kind of pollinators that are going to come later in the day, like some of the moths. So there's a little bit of thinking around it, but it's basically gardening with native plants, which supports everything. And we actually did a pilot garden last year here in Austin and developed a plant list with talking with the Wildflower Center, the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center here and their horticulturists. And we really want to expand this program. And we're looking kind of right now, we're applying for a lot of grant funding to bring this program other places. And we really think it's something people can get excited about. And we're kind of trying to move away from bat houses. I mean, I think bat houses are great as an education tool and as an outreach tool, but they don't have a ton of conservation value, and they're definitely not one-to-one mitigation with natural habitat. And so, you know, people can still put up bat houses, and that's fantastic, but we also want to encourage them to make their yard bat friendly and kind of invite native species and create kind of these, hopefully these kind of urban habitat corridors of bat habitat. I'm going to skip this because it's different now. I'm sorry, this PowerPoint's a little old. We also did a lot of volunteer appreciation. I just wanted to talk, I love these pins. We had these pins made. They look weird on a white background, but they're round pins. And our bat ambassadors get to get them if they report their bat walks. You get one, the Mexican free-tailed bat, if you complete the training. And then after one bat walk, you get a red bat. And then we had an artist do these, and it was a really fun thing to do. And now we have lots of pins. So it's kind of like the more bat walks you do, you get these badges of honor, and you can brag about your cool bat pins. And then if someone goes over 20, we will definitely make more pins because there's so many different bat species. And our artist was very, very excited about it. So that it was really fun. And I did want to talk about, we had a collaboration last year with I Am a Scientist, which is a fantastic program run through the Pollinary group, where they're just trying to show scientists of all different walks of life and backgrounds to show kids that they can see themselves in science. And it's a really fantastic program. And we were able to feature 3 of our scientists and their work with bats on their website. And they created curriculum related to what our scientists do, and also focused on their actual story and how they kind of came up in science. It's iamascientist.info. Highly recommend checking it out. It's Dr. Kristen Lear, Dr. Melky Gambarios, and Dr. Tina Chang. And we're just really proud of them. And we're really proud to kind of lift them up and show all the good work that they've been doing. And we were the only bat people they had in all of I Am a Scientist. And we were really excited to bring that angle to it and to let kids know that you can work in bats. Bat conservation needs you for sure. I had an intern last year too, who created a bunch of cool content. So a lot of our time last year was spent making virtual things. And so my intern did a series of 5 videos called the Backyard Bativists, which is just activists for bats. And it's 5 different activities parents can do with kids, or kids can do on their own with the corresponding video. These are all featured on our website, which is exciting, and she did an amazing job, and I just like to brag about her and highly recommend checking these out if you need some fun bat things to do. And so now, where are we now? Well, as I said, we did an online training last year, and we've actually moved towards an online classroom. We now have an online classroom through the platform Moodle, where we're actually going to move most of the Bat Walks training online. And we're still going to have the in-person part of the training with the bat detector, but that's only going to be a few hours. It's going to be outside, and it's going to be, you know, with masks and following all those COVID protocols. We definitely don't want, you know, 30 to 40 people in a classroom for 8 hours anymore. That's just not happening. Nobody's doing that. We don't want to do that. We don't feel comfortable doing that. So we moved most of the class online, and this content is available to people that sign up for the trainings. Our trainings are still going to be location-based, but we're thinking about it a little bit differently. At least for now, we're going places where we have staff, and we have staff kind of all over the country, so it works out really well. We've got an upcoming training in Portland, and we've got 2 staff members that live there. They're on our subterranean team, and they're going to actually lead the bat detector part of the training. So it's a really fun way to get staff into kind of some new things that they haven't done before, and also just get them involved in our outreach program. Usually those guys are underground, you know, looking at mines and caves, and now they're going to be out there talking to people, which is really exciting. So the staff does the in-person training wherever they live, and then I run kind of all the online stuff and kind of all that stuff on the back end. And the content people can go through at their own pace. We're giving them about 2 weeks to go through all of it, which we think is enough time, but we're still kind of figuring that out. So in the summer and fall, we actually have 3 kind of new, we're just constantly piloting things. We never stop piloting, but we have 3 kind of pilot trainings using the online classroom in Colorado, in Portland, and then in El Paso, Texas, to kind of see how it goes and what is working, what is not. And I should say BCI, like many organizations, is kind of working to incorporate more diversity, equity, inclusion in everything that we do. So we're actually really focusing on bat walks with this DEI lens and trying to see, what other values we can bring to a community and how we can kind of create lasting partnerships and support in those communities and come to it in a very genuine way that, brings bat conservation to everyone, which is great for us, but, it's great for so many different reasons. And this is so valuable. So it's exciting that we're kind of rethinking this program on so many different levels. It's a little terrifying, but it's also very exciting because I think it's given us a chance to really make the program more flexible and to make us hopefully have a greater impact and reach. And that's it. I will take questions. That's my email. Feel free to contact me about anything bats or bat walks or BCI.
Thank you, Erin. So do we have any questions? If you want to unmute yourself, either for Erin or for Megan and Cora. Or feel free to.
I'm gonna turn on. Yeah, you're on. Let me know when you're ready.
Okay, go ahead with your question.
Okay, earlier on, it was mentioned micro-siting for bat houses. And the city of Deltona currently has plans to put up about 15 bat houses in the next 12 months and probably about 35 in the next 24 months. So it's important to us to make sure we're getting them located properly. Can someone give us a little bit of information on that?
Megan, do you want to cover that, or I can, or?
No, go for it, Erin. I mean, we're really specific to Montana, and so what you guys have for resources for other places.
Okay. We have kind of these general recommendations, and there's kind of a caveat with these. It's sort of they're, as I said, they're very general. So if they don't work, I would say give it about 2 years, and if your houses are not occupied, then we can kind of talk about other options. But generally, you want to face them south, southeast, or east, because you want them to get 6 to 8 hours of sun per day, but you want to make sure they don't get that like hot afternoon sun. You want them not on a tree, because that makes them super vulnerable to predators. We only recommend the larger chambered houses now. We no longer recommend the small chambered houses, 3 to 4 chambers, because you really need kind of options for the bats to kind of go to different temperatures. So, if the front of the house is really hot, they can kind of move to the back of the house and where it's cooler, because there are some issues with bat houses overheating. So you want to make sure to try to avoid that as much as possible. We recommend putting them on buildings because they have more stable temperature on buildings, but you can put them on posts as well. That also is successful. You want them 12 to 20 feet off the ground so the bats can swoop out and there's nothing kind of blocking them. And then about 20 to 30 feet from the nearest trees, because you want to just make sure they're safe from predators. And those are kind of the general recommendations. You can go on our website, batcon.org, and there's a whole bat houses section, which you can kind of look through, and feel free to email me if you have kind of more specific questions.
Thanks, Erin. Okay, it is 3. So I want to thank everybody for joining us, but feel free to stick around, and we still have a little bit of time that we can ask questions. But thank you for joining us if you have to move on to another meeting. And Erin and Megan and Cora, thank you for joining us today.
And thank you. And I just want to add that, I kind of botched that with time. We've got a whole table of cool stuff laid out here that we would be happy to.
If you guys are willing to stay on, if anybody wants to stay on for a little bit longer, we can keep the webinar going.
We can do that, or we can take photos of this stuff and send them out. It's really up to you. I mean, if you can see how many, I don't know how many folks are still on here, how many folks have gone away.
Still have 21 participants hanging on.
All right, so why don't we just go for it? And then if folks want to hang up, they can, and then we will put together something. So those folks that did have to go, we'll have something. So
that sounds good.
And I'm the webcam,
Megan,
and I apologize for any What was that?
Erin, thank
Nope.
you.
Bye, Erin.
Sorry, I've got another meeting, but it was so good to see you guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Thank you, Erin. Bye.
Yeah, so we'll do our best not to make anyone seasick because we're gonna hold the cam and then Cora is going to demonstrate some of the items and we'll be as quick as we can here, just showing stuff to folks. And then, as I said, we'll send out a better kind of maybe photo documentation of what we have for folks to refer to later. And I'm happy to converse one-on-one with folks as well. So Cora's gonna share her webcam now.
Okay, let's see. There we go. Okay. No.
All right, here we go. Let's start with the poster.
So these are the bats we have in Montana. We got this
Boy.
So yeah, these are the most common species in Montana.
Why don't you flip over and show them back?
And this is really cool. It's a
Megan, it's really hard to hear you.
Oh, Cora, can you just speak up?
Yeah.
I'm gonna shut.
Getting a lot of feedback.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I hope you can hear us now.
Much better.
So these are ranges of all the species in Montana and some issues with conservation and bat facts. So this is a really important and kind of cool little poster we have here that people can take home.
Flashlight if you're gonna that one.
Yes.
You don't take it out.
Okay, these are just flashlight we use for back walks. It's important for like bodies of water. You can see bats flying above it, really cool. This echolocation is really cool. So you can kind of have a visual of how it works. You have a slinky, you put it in your ear and you let it hit the floor and the sound bounces back. Pretty cool. We have a bat lunchbox. So you have nectar from a mango maybe, and you got bugs and fish and snakes, all that kind of stuff. This is, like Erin talked about, one of those bat sonar things. Those are pretty cool. And thank you, bat detectors. This is another one of those bat detectors. You can hear the noise. So when a bat would make a call, you can hear it. Pretty cool. We have one of these fossils like Megan was talking about. You can do a really cool rubbing and people get to take it home. It's kind of a cool reminder. It's the same fossil. It's pretty cool. There's a bat skeleton. Really cool. You can see its wings and how tiny those bones are. Here's a skull. I don't know if you want to get it.
We can try. We're gonna try and show you this little bat skull. There it is.
Really small, really cool. This is a cookbook that has, it's really cool. It has a lot of the things bats pollinate or eat in here, so that's pretty cool.
Yep, and you can print that off online. And I'm happy to tell folks about any of the resources we have. And just to, I think I'll wrap it up here and show you these are some cool things that we got from our Montana wild. So those are replica bats. They're made of wood just for size. And so the big one is supposed to be the size of a big brown bat, and the small one is a little brown bat. And the bodies are actually really cool. They're recycled hides that we're going to be gotten rid of. I think one of them is actually a bear hide. And one of them, I think maybe is one of the cats, maybe a bobcat hide. And then just in general, the bat detectors that we use, those handheld detectors we use for walks, they come from the UK, the magenta bats, and they're about USD with shipping. They probably end up about $120 a piece. And then we've got a bunch of books out here, kids books, field guides. So yeah, I guess with that, if anyone still has questions and we have any time, we'll answer them. I'm sorry for the rushed, wobbly webcam presentation part there, but I'd be happy to share. I have a really good list of bat trunk stuff aside from the stuff that we use that I'd be happy to share with people as well. I don't even remember who I got it from at this point, but it's a really, am I done with this? It's a really cohesive list of really cool stuff that you can put into a trunk. So again, I love doing this stuff. I'm pretty excited about it. I have plenty of other stuff that we didn't put out or I didn't share at length, but even just educational events aside from wildlife viewing, I'm happy to share anything that we have. So I think that's it. And that was a lot in 6 minutes.
Thanks. Thanks, Megan. Thanks.
So thank you everyone that hung in. And
Any questions
We went
before
over.
we adjourn? Doesn't sound like it. Well, thank you. Appreciate your spending time with us and the show and tell. Thanks, everybody. Do you want to type your contact information in the chat before we shut down?